Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus is a special one today. Her name is Honorable Anita Anand. Law seems to be something that you're interested in. Most welcome in our program. How are you doing?
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So as a lawyer, I've noticed many lawyers go into politics. Was that something that attracted you to politics?
Not really. It was my mom when we were young.
Mm-hmm.
She had constantly encouraged me to become a member of parliament. And while she was alive, I said that I was not interested. And it was only sadly after she passed away that I decided to run for public office.
Mm-hmm.
Many people told me as a racialized woman that I would not get elected in Oakville, Ontario.
Right.
And so there were a few barriers that I felt existed even before running. But I persevered and decided that I would give it a try. And certainly, overcoming some of those hurdles is hard. But I had really good, strong family support. I have two sisters. My spouse is also very supportive. I have 4 children and twins in the middle as well. So
wow.
we are a family that likes to support each other.
So you talked about your family. Let me take you back to your childhood. You were born in Nova Scotia?
Mm-hmm.
So how was your upbringing?
So my parents were medical doctors. And
both of them?
Both of them. And they met in Ireland, got married in England, and lived in India and Nigeria before deciding to move to Kentville, Nova Scotia, where my younger sister and I were born, and my older sister had been born in Nigeria.
Wow.
So we were one of a very few South Asian families in the province at the time.
Right.
But that didn't matter. We became integral members of the community, and we had an idyllic childhood, growing up with great friends and neighbors, enjoying school and multiple extracurricular activities. It was joyful, and I have fond memories.
Parents, especially South Asian parents and people outside of South Asia, also know that South Asian parents are very particular about their children's education. Mm-hmm. So were there any demands on you as a child?
Well, when we were playing, my mother used to walk by and say things like, you can be a lawyer or a doctor, or you should go to Oxford. There's just one-liners as we were playing. I guess she thought that by osmosis we would, we would become influenced by her words, and I guess in some ways we were. But it was really one day when my mom put us in her car and drove us down the highway to the Greenwood Canadian Armed Forces base, and a helicopter was landing, and this was in the early 1970s. And we were standing behind barricades, and there were large crowds. And out of the helicopter that landed stepped Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And he walked over to my mother, who was dressed in a sari, and he said, "Namaste."
Wow.
And this is the early 1970s in the Annapolis Valley in Nova Scotia. It was a pivotal moment in our family and our mother's life.
Right.
She told us from that day on that we needed to serve our country and that our country needs us. And so maybe in those conversations that happened after that, she was herself influenced by the call to public service and then passed that down to us as her children. And I will say that she continued to look to me as being the one who would run. And then along the way, my dad made sure that I could speak French. Et c'est possible maintenant de parler le français à cause de mon père. And he sent me to learn how to speak French to different schools. And so that is really important, obviously, now in my life, to be able to speak
both the languages.
Both official languages.
So I understand that your first name is Indira and then Anita Anand.
Yes.
So Anita Anand You kept that because it is easier for people to pronounce?
Well, for starters, it was only when I was leaving home that I asked my mom for my birth certificate.
Okay.
And I saw that my first name was actually Indira Anita, not the other way around.
Right.
And I said, Mom, I didn't know that that was my first name. And she kind of smiled, but I was named after Indira Gandhi.
Wow.
My mother had a great affection for Indira Gandhi, and my grandfather on my father's side actually marched with Mahatma Gandhi in the salt marches during the 1930s, and he was imprisoned with Mahatma Gandhi. He went for walks with Mahatma Gandhi, and my father, in fact, recited the Bhagavad Gita for Mahatma Gandhi when he came to my grandparents' home in Benares, Varanasi.
Right.
So there is a stream then of understanding what it means to represent folks in a democracy that may have carried through.
Isn't that just beautiful? I mean,
well, it's only in retrospect, though, because after people told me that a racialized woman couldn't run in Oakville, Ontario and win, you know, a lot of cards seemed stacked against me. And I think one of the reasons why I continued was that I believe in the power of our democracy, and I believe in the principles of equality and diversity and inclusion. And I want our public institutions to look like Canada, to represent the demographic composition of our country.
I want to talk a little bit about your early life when you were getting into politics and all the hurdles that you've had. But let's take a very short commercial break. Minister Anand is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Minister Anand. So we were talking about, you know, women have had issues getting in corporate offices. Parents probably are the main people who sort of push them, and how you take it. I mean, you know, you mentioned that you were getting subliminal messages from your mom, you know, be a lawyer or whatever. What sort of obstacles did you have to face to get to where you are today?
Well, we were always taught to persevere and to work hard. And so I think that was always the overriding impetus, and the reason why we kept going was because our parents had done that.
Yeah.
And my older sister, 6 years older than me, I had seen her do that.
Right.
And so whenever we faced some hurdles, our parents would simply say, get back up, brush yourself off, and keep on going. I remember many times feeling downhearted about being rejected from applying for a scholarship or a job or something along those lines. This has happened many times. And my mother would say, keep on going. Don't be deterred.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say those words now.
Yeah.
And certainly at the time, like I had many tears.
Right.
And I just am grateful that my mom taught me to keep persevering and keeping going on.
I think it's you're an embodiment of whatever your mother has taught you, and I think that strength you carry with you. And when you ran from Oakville, Ontario, how did you come to Ontario from?
So in 1985, I graduated from high school.
Right.
And Nova Scotia was the only place I had ever lived. And as I said, we had a wonderful childhood and many, many friends. In a town of 5,000. And then I was just thinking about where I should go, and I had heard that Queen's University was a really good school. So I decided to go there. I had received a scholarship which covered my tuition for 4 years, and so thought that that was a good idea. And then my younger sister came to Queen's as well, and my parents ended up moving to Napanee, where my dad practiced medicine, taught at Queen's as well, and then my mom started doing psychiatry residency at Queen's. So we were all located in kind of a radius in Ontario at the time.
Right.
But my big sister and my little sister said that my parents followed me to Queen's. They always would tease me about, why did Anita get to learn French? Why did Mom and Dad follow Anita to
Is
Ontario?
Anita the favorite child?
That's what I think they had teased me about for some time, but it wasn't true.
So in South Asian culture, and people, think that young women have to follow whatever their parents say, get married wherever they want. So
Yeah.
how was that for you?
Well, Mom was always telling us that we have to support ourselves, no
Right.
matter what. We
Yes.
needed a profession to support ourselves. And so once I had become a lawyer, then she decided that it was time for me to get married, and she
Okay.
told me that.
Yeah, she said that to you.
She said it's time to get married, and so that's what I did. And then she didn't tell me when it was time to have children, but she unfortunately got cancer, and I wanted to make sure that I had grandchildren for her as soon as possible. So I said to my husband, my new husband, that it was going to be our choice to have children, and we had 4 children and
Beautiful.
twins in the middle. And
So did you marry? Were you supposed to marry Indian, or could you marry anybody?
I married John Knowlton, who is
Not
not of
Indian.
Indian descent, but he was and continues to be perhaps the most supportive spouse anybody could ever have.
Isn't that just beautiful? You've got 4 kids.
1 boy and 3 daughters.
Right.
And as you know, when the first grandson was born,
Yes.
after my mother had had 3 daughters, that was a cause for celebration. But they're all in their 20s now. My son is 27,
Wow.
my twins are 25, and my youngest is 22.
Isn't that just
So
beautiful?
I feel like it was a good time for me to go into
Yes.
politics, because my children were of an age where they might not miss me as much.
Right. So you were there when they were very little. And now that they are, they can look after themselves, you are doing what you like most.
Well, I loved being a teacher and a professor of law
Yes.
at the University of Toronto, and I taught at Yale and did some work at Cambridge and Western and Queen's. So I loved being an academic, writing academic articles in the area of corporate and securities law was a huge honor, and I love teaching as well.
That's beautiful.
So one day I hope to go back. The
To teaching.
University of Toronto is allowing me to be on a leave of absence, so hopefully one day I'll go back there.
I want to talk to you about politics, and what is it that you personally want to see being done? I mean, you are at a very important phase in your life as well, and in the phase of life of our country too. And the political landscape too is quite different. And myriads of problems come up, and so on and so forth. A little bit about politics right after I take a short commercial break.
Perfect. Thank you.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Minister Anand. So I want to talk about politics. Now, people think, and I have always thought that politics is a dirty business. How would you describe politics?
One of the things I find enjoyable about politics is that you form fast friendships with many, many people. Vibrant and responsible, dedicated caucus, as well as cabinet ministers, and certainly the Department of Public Servants that is also so dedicated. One thing that I find difficult about politics is the politics, in the sense that people assume that you're dishonest,
Yes.
or that you have an ulterior motive or agenda. And so I will say that I love working I love working hard, and I love making friends and serving our country, and that's really what keeps me in the game.
I was, and many people from our community as well and around the world were very impressed when you became the defense minister. Was that ministry a difficult one for you?
It was difficult in the sense that the issues were intractable. Sexual misconduct and sexual assault in the Canadian Armed Forces, for example. Responding to that, developing an agenda for ways in which we can address massive injustices that have existed over years, systemic problems, as well as the illegal Russian invasion of Ukraine, making sure we got aid to Ukraine, military aid, humanitarian aid, and economic aid, which our government really moved quickly on. But those difficult problems were also addressed through a team. And it wasn't just me, it was an excellent department and the armed forces. And so I do enjoy working hard, as I said, and being part of a team. And I really felt that when I was at Defense.
Now, prior to Defense, you were also, there was a difficult time for the entire world when COVID hit everyone. So procurement of vaccines was handed over to you, and so you had to look after all that.
So
how stressful was that?
It was very stressful.
I bet.
Every day was very, very stressful. And it started with PPE and then rapid tests and vaccines.
Right.
And so I call that the 3 mountains that we had to climb.
Wow.
And the mountain for vaccines was the steepest mountain because the whole world was in a race for vaccines that were being produced by just a handful or less of suppliers of vaccines. But what I did at the beginning on the advice of the Vaccine Task Force and my department was to diversify our vaccine portfolio to make sure that we were investing in multiple vaccines at the same time so that whichever vaccine proved to be the most successful after clinical trials would be a vaccine that we had access to.
Right.
So when it was clear that the mRNA vaccines of Pfizer and Moderna were at an over 90% efficacy rate, we were very well placed as a country to receive doses of those vaccines, and I knew that we would be receiving vaccines that were coming like a rocket.
Right.
And indeed, we were the most vaccinated country by July 2021.
No, that was fantastic, the way we, combated that. Now, in your current position, are you minting money, or what do you do as a president of the Treasury Board?
Many people ask, what does the president of the Treasury Board do?
That's right.
So a couple weeks ago, I tabled $450 billion of government expenditures. That gives you a bird's eye view into what the president of the Treasury Board does. She oversees the expenditures of government, make sure that government is accountable for those expenditures, and ensures that we are not wasting taxpayer dollars. In addition to that, I am overseeing the government spending review, which is seeking to reallocate $15.8 billion of taxpayer dollars towards government priorities. So where is there unnecessary spending in the system? External contracting, executive travel, and making sure that we're using taxpayer dollars efficiently. We're also in charge of 300,000 public servants. We're the largest employer in the country.
Right.
And then greening government, all of the government buildings and all the vehicles, that is also in my portfolio. And then finally, digital government. Digitizing all of the government systems and making sure they're secure from cyber attacks is also in my portfolio. So you can see that it's very, very broad and challenging, but I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for entrusting me in 3 large portfolios like that, and very grateful.
Now, housing is a crisis everywhere.
It is, yes.
What is your government doing, and especially for the Liberals, it has been a thorn in their side, isn't it?
So we're taking decisive action across a number of areas. The first, which we have done, is to eliminate the GST
Okay.
on apartments and purpose-built rentals.
Right.
So that unlocks supply right there. Negotiating and finalizing agreements with municipalities. So the federal government is signing agreements with municipalities to provide funding through our rapid housing initiative. That's unprecedented. You don't typically see the federal government negotiating with municipalities.
No.
But we've done that. Minister Sean Fraser has done that across the country.
Right.
From Brampton to Halifax to Vancouver. The list goes on. And I really think that this is going to move the needle on increasing the supply of housing. Supply, supply, supply. That is the name of the game.
There are so many questions that I can ask you, but you know, in a half-an-hour program, we've not even we've just skirted on all the topics. I wanted to find out from you, and it's a silly question. When you got married, did you get married in an Indian outfit or in a Western outfit?
So that's funny you should mention that, because one of the arguments that my spouse, or to-be, fiance I guess at the time, and I had was what I was going to wear at the wedding.
Yes.
And I had to tell him that I'd be wearing a sari.
Yes.
And I said, I'm not sure if you envision me in a white wedding dress, but that's not going to happen. So I wore a white sari to our Christian wedding, and I wore a red sari to our Indian wedding.
Yes.
And
So you had two weddings.
we had them back to back.
Back to back.
And all of our parents were alive, and they all were there, and many family and friends were there celebrating with us also. So it was a very joyful occasion.
Big wedding, small wedding?
200 people, wintry day, January 7th, and 1995, and it was a really nice day.
Beautiful. I take this opportunity and thank you very much for being our Woman in Focus today.
Oh, thank you very much. And I look forward to keeping the conversation going.
Of course.
It's a real privilege to chat with you today. Thank you so much.
Minister Anand has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.